In this part of the video, we will be discussing the rest of the renewable energy resources. So number 3, we have wind energy. So I'm willing to bet that if you have been to Ilocos, you have been in a wind farm yourself. So wind farm is a collection of wind turbines for efficient production of electricity. So wind energy has been used by humans to power several of our inventions. So for example, we use wind energy to sail across the world in galleon trades. So we use the sail of the ship, so being pushed by wind energy in order to control where the ship goes. Next, we also use wind energy to pump water and also to power our mills. Okay, so air currents in the atmosphere does create wind. So the air currents that we are talking about in our atmosphere provides the kinetic energy, and the kinetic energy of the air currents will spin the turbines. So the turbines and the gearbox combined is our mechanical power. So the gearbox moving now will create electricity through the use of our power generators. Now, you will see there that there is a power interface connected to a control system which is connected to our turbine, because whenever you are producing electricity, you have to control the amount of electricity you're actually producing. So you have to produce enough electricity to supply the demand of communities and cities, but not too much that it will overload our infrastructures. Of course, like all things, there's only a certain limit of how much electricity can go through our systems before it blows off. So the control system is a way for us to control how much energy one turbine can produce. So if the system detects, or the human engineer detects that there is enough electricity to suffice the community or the power grid, then using the control system, it will stop the turbine, thus stopping the production of electricity. So the idea of having to control our sources, energy resources, is applicable to all electricity, all renewable sources. Okay, so some facts about wind energy. It's moderate net energy and high efficiency at accessible sites. So highlight on accessible sites, because we cannot put wind farms anywhere. There are only certain locations that is sustainable to put them. So high wind power locations where there is high wind power, that even if the cost of building them is high, the production of electricity will be low. So there will be an offset, and the cost of electricity will still be reasonable for our consumers. Okay, so lower carbon dioxide emissions than fossil fuels. The fossil fuel emissions of our wind energy is only present during its production. So once you are able to build your wind farms, then you virtually don't have any more carbon dioxide emissions. Low costs at favorable sites. So as I said, since you're producing a lot of electricity, it is balancing the cost of building the wind farm. Independent of weather, so you have to build this in locations where there is wind energy all year round, so that you will have a sustainable and dependable source of electricity. Okay, available the whole year round. So this is what I was talking about. Available the whole year round at accessible sites. Okay, so high cost and low efficiency except at concentrated and accessible sites. So that's the downside. It could be expensive if your wind farm is not producing enough electricity. Scarcity of suitable sites. So there are only certain locations where you can put wind farms. Noise. So again, if you have been to the Ilocos wind farm, then you will hear that it does produce some noise. And susceptibility to earthquakes and other geological disasters. So if the location of the wind farms are vulnerable to to disasters, then it's gonna be a costly disaster because wind to build a wind farm is very expensive. Okay, so something that was not mentioned earlier, or mentioned here, is the effect of wind farms to wildlife, because there are now, like, there are stories from Bangi, that's the wind farm in Ilocos, where birds died, like a lot, hundreds of birds died because they are not aware of what a wind farm is. And even if they don't fly directly into the wind turbines, the push, or like the air current that the turbines produce actually sets, or like confuses the birds, and that might lead them to plummet to their death. So in the Bangi, there were several birds who died or sacrificed themselves in the name of electricity. But now, yeah, the birds of Bangi have adopted, and you really don't see any dead birds there anymore because the birds already adopted. But the other locations in the world is also reporting the same thing, that there were the birds were the casualty of wind farms. So some people might not care because they're just some common birds, but what if the birds that perish in wind farms are the migrating birds, and they are endangered? So what then? If we produce a lot of wind farms, it may put some of our bird wildlife in danger. Okay, so that's one con that is not listed here. Okay, so this is an image of the Bangi wind farm. So as you have seen, not all turbines will be on because you have to control how much electricity the wind farm is producing. And there is a smaller one in Rizal, the Rizal wind farm near Manila. Okay, so next renewable source is solar energy. So solar energy, sun as the source of energy, so as the name suggests. So how does this work? You create solar panels. So the solar panels capture the heat energy provided by the sun, and that is enough to excite the electrons in our solar panels. So that could be connected to a control device to mediate its distribution. Okay, so the electricity then passes through a breaker box, which outlets to the rest of the building, and thus powering our electricity devices. So this is just a picture of an ideal home, like an ideal setup of how a home could be supported by solar panels, electricity from solar panels. Okay, so pros, it's abundant. There is a lot of solar energy being continuously provided by our sun every day. It's low maintenance because all you need is a solar panel and just leave it there. Just leave it there, and then it will absorb the heat from the sun, and that's pretty much it. It will provide you electricity. It's environmentally friendly, question mark, because okay, I will talk about it later. But environmental friendly because once you install it, there will be no wildlife that will be harmed in the process, and there are minimal emissions. So the emissions again happen during the production of the solar panels. Of course, the solar panels, you need materials and special metals. So these will be mined, and once that, you will have to build your solar panels, and during that process there will be some emissions. So cons, it's currently still expensive, but the trend recently in the past years is the cost of solar panels are actually decreasing, and there are some projections that it will further decrease, so that solar energy will even more be more accessible to people. So right now there are some expensive installation costs, but not for long, I hope. Next, it requires rare metals. So as I've mentioned, it needs certain special metals in order to properly work. So we have to expend resources to build our solar panels. Next, it requires a large amount of space because you can there are something called solar farms. So it's like wind farms, but instead of putting turbines, we install solar panels. So these locations are strategic locations as well because they always receive a lot of um, solar power or sunlight, and this is not like locations wherein there is a lot of weather changes. Okay, but that in itself, this by the way is in Batangas, Calatagan, Batangas. You need a lot of space in order to create like a solar farm. Okay. Another con that was not mentioned here is the life of solar panels, because solar panels will be functional, let's say 20 years at most. So one solar panel is functional for 20 years. But what after 20 years? So that means we might, if like solar panels become cheaper, it will become one of the electric wastes that we will dump somewhere in our environment. So that's another thing. There are also some trouble when we are discussing solar energy, because there are some companies who are already selling solar panels as commercial use, but solar energy is not very dependable because sunlight in certain locations is not always present, or like in different parts of the world there are areas with very little sunlight, so we cannot use that as a source of energy for them or source of electricity for them. So solar energy will also depend on the location if it's gonna be plausible. There it might also cause fluctuations in the power demand. So that's something that's quite a long discussion. But yeah, solar energy, although it's romanticized, like it's very good, it's very clean, it's not as sustainable or as dependable rather as hydrothermal, geothermal, and wind energy because of the weather patterns and the climate of certain locations. Okay, finally, we have number 5, which is your biomass energy. So when you are talking about biomass energy, it's similar to fossil fuels, but instead of using sources which has been buried deep into the earth millions of years ago, you're going to use recent dead organisms. So there's no light way of putting it. So recent dead organisms, organic matter from plants and or animals. So it may come in the form of wood, crop remains, manure, and garbage. Okay, so biomass energy may contain methane and alcohol. So if you recall, methane is the component of our natural gas. So fuels that are useful in energy production and powering machinery. So it could either be in the form of methane and alcohol, or it could be in the form of biogas or biofuels. So it involves the action of microorganisms that break down the organic matter. Okay, so this is an example of a biomass. So using algae in order to create a biofuel which we can power our vehicles. So you have algae ponds wherein you're just gonna cultivate a lot of algae, and now once you have a lot of algae, you harvest that and extract the fuel from our algae. This will then be refined in order to be processed or like used as a replacement fuel for our vehicles. So it could be used to replace jet fuel, gasoline, or diesel. Sounds very good. Sounds like a very sustainable source because we could just keep on growing algae and then we have fuel. But algae grows really, really slow. And in order to produce a lot of algae, you need time, resources, and like the facilities in order to do that. So even if like it's a good idea, like it it's not a dependable source because it takes too much time. The demand for fuel is too high to base it or yeah to base it on algae, but you can use it like a small percentage perhaps. So a small percentage of our energy could come from biofuel. So that's one example. There are also proposals to use cooking oil. So we could convert used cooking oil to power our vehicles instead, because as humanity, we love to cook. Every household uses cooking oil. So maybe if we do have a way to like reprocess the hydrocarbons in our cooking oil, then we can do that to power our electricity. There has been some experiments abroad, but I'm not sure if anyone has already tried it here in the Philippines. So this is maybe something that I might want to try, or like the possibility of using cooking oil as biofuel. Okay, pros, it's a renewable fuel source because biomass that is present in our environment is already present. There's minimal environmental impact because, for example, you're just gonna grow algae in a controlled environment, and that's pretty much it. Because since you have a controlled environment, it's not gonna affect the other parts of the natural world. It also creates employment because you have to build facilities to to cultivate algae and also convert that into fuel. So alcohol fuels are efficient and clean burning. So instead of using dirty fossil fuel oil, we will produce alcohol fuel, and that's cleaner than what fossil fuels produce. And it's universal availability. So as long as there are locations wherein you could produce biomass, then you can use that as a source of energy. So cons, contribution to global warming. So even if, again, these are similar to fossil fuels, just a bit cleaner, but it still produces some form of greenhouse gas because yeah, it's pretty much the same. The plants that we will burning, the algae, the cooking oil is still made up of hydrocarbon chains. So eventually, it will still, once we burn it, it will still produce carbon dioxide and other harmful gases. It's expensive because you have to build facilities and like cost of production in order to convert that to alcohol fuel. So net loss of energy. Energy is required to grow plant mass. So this is what I was talking about. Like you have to use resources and energy as well to grow our plants to convert them into alcohol fuel. But there is an interesting biofuel factory or biofuel power plant in City, Negros Occidental, because Victoria City is known for their sugarcane production. So they have been supplying our country with sugar for like decades now. So what they did recently, I think in 2018, is since whenever you're producing sugarcane, you're not using the whole plant. There will be parts of the plant which you will not use, for example, the leaves and the smaller parts of the sugar cane. So you can actually use the non-essential parts of the sugar cane to power, convert that into alcohol fuel and then producing electricity. So this is actually a good proposal because you have a farm still producing sugar cane, and then whatever you don't need, you use it to produce electricity. So this has been like praised by our local government, like of our national government, because of its ingenuity. So this is a private owned biofuel power plant. Okay, so I hope you learned a lot from our fossil fuels and renewable energy sources discussion. We have already gone through discussing how fossil fuels are formed and how renewable sources are converted into electricity for our everyday use. Hopefully, I could discuss more about this, about energy resources with you in our synchronous session. That's all. Stay safe. Bye.